Hey everybody, happy Tutorial Thursday. That means it is lunchtime tutorial stream time on the Beating Dreams channel. How's everybody doing? Wherever you are today, I hope everyone is having a solidly good Thursday so far. It's another hot, sunshiny day here in Dallas. Big surprise. We're pretty much in for hot, sunshiny days without end for the next, approximately 8 to 10 years. I don't know. It's definitely summer here in Dallas. It's definitely hot. It's definitely sunny. So, it is what it is. I still would rather have that than winter any day. So welcome to the Beating Dreams lunchtime tutorial stream. We have a fun bracelet for you all this afternoon. This is our charming leather bracelet. So it's just a fun little kind of riff on a charm bracelet, something that's a little bit more updated, something that incorporates a little bit of leather. And also, you don't have to have as many charms to make it look like a full bracelet. So let's talk tools and supplies for this afternoon's tutorial. You are going to need some leather, and I am using 1.5 millimeter leather, and I've got mine in this kind of bronzy color, but really any color is going to work great. And you don't have to use 1.5. You can use any size that's going to make a knot that's not too bulky. That is the thing, is if we take a quick look at the project, it's got those two knots on either side of the bracelet, and so we just don't want those knots to be too large and bulky. Winter isn't bad. It's the -40 that takes getting used to. No, thank you. I'll pass. I think the coldest ambient temperatures I've ever experienced in my life were in Wisconsin when I was a kid, and the ambient got down to like -35 for a couple of days, and they actually closed school. We had 2 cold days, but I have never experienced lower than -35 ambient, and I am happy about that. I hope I never experience minus anything ever again in my life. No, thank you. In addition to leather, you are going to need some chain. So I've got a large link chain here. How much chain you need isn't so much the consideration as how many links you need, because if you look at my chain, this is a pretty typical cable chain where the links are, perpendicular to each other. So I'm going to do 5 charms. So that means whatever length of chain, I need to have 5 of the links that are facing the same way, plus a link on either side to attach. So in this case I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and link here. So I can trim my chain off here and here, and I'm good. So for this particular chain, that's about 3 inches, and that's my length. But that may vary depending on what type of chain you're using. Now the cool thing about this chain is it's not soldered, so even though it's pretty big, I don't need a giant wire cutter to separate it. I just need my chain nose pliers and another pair of pliers to help out, and I can literally just grab that and pull it apart. It's kind of cool because you could theoretically actually reuse this link as well. I know if you're like me, I get very sad every time I have to cut a link of chain and trash it. 3, 4, 5, so this is the other one. So it's nice, the non-soldered chains, that you can reuse the link. However, of course, the peril of non-soldered chains is they're not soldered, they're not as sturdy. So I tend to use non-soldered chains only in my bigger sizes, where the chain itself, like just the actual links themselves, are plenty sturdy on their own. In addition to my chain, I'm going to need charms, and in my online supply list it just said charms and attachments, because what attachments you're going to use really depends on what charms you have. And I have one too many here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you have something that is some kind of like an actual charm or pendant piece that's made out of metal or wood or stone or whatever that has a loop at the top, you need a jump ring. You need an open loop to attach that onto your bracelet. Now, a lot of charms like this one that I'm holding come with a jump ring already, as long as that jump ring is sturdy looking, which this one is, and it's not mangled or anything. You can definitely use the ring that comes with the clasp, or with the charm. If you don't have a charm, or if you don't have a ring that comes with your charm already, then you can definitely go ahead and just use a separate jump ring. So I've got 2 charms that have rings on them, so I'm set in that department. There's the ring for that. All right, I've got 2 beads. I've got 2 beads that should be on silent, shush you. I've got 2 beads, and for the beads that are center drilled like this, my attachment for those is going to be a head pin, which is this piece of wire that just kind of goes through the middle of the bead, and it's got a flat piece at the end of it that's going to make a stopper. So that's what I'm going to use to attach my bead onto my charm bracelet with, of course, a basic wire wrap loop. And then the last type of bead or charm that you might have is something that is top drilled, like this piece of cherry blossom agate here. So where you have a hole, but it doesn't go through the middle of the bead, it goes through the top. And we did a lot of these in our earring tutorial last night. So for that, I'm going to need a little bit of wire. So I've got some 24 gauge wire here. And then to attach our clasp onto the end of our bracelet, we're going to need cord ends. You can use tubular cord ends or fold over cord ends. I'm using fold overs. Today, you're going to need a clasp, and it's a tendon ring or whatever that clasp is going to clasp into. And then you're going to need a couple of jump rings to attach your clasp onto your cord ends. So I'm going to start by creating my center charm section. Okay, so I've sectioned out my chain so that I have 5 links that I can see that are all facing the same way. So again, that's going to look like this here. Okay, so yeah, that's going to look like this here. So again, I've got my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then these 2 end links are what I'm going to attach my leather to. So I'm going to start with the middle link, and which one do I want in the middle? That's a really good question. So let's take a minute and do kind of a layout of these. Okay. I like that. So I just switched out my black tourmaline for this little citrine. Functions the same way, but just kind of balances more with the sizes that I have chosen. So I'm going to start with my cherry blossom agate. So this is my top drilled one. This is the one I'm going to need to attach with wire. So I'm going to take my wire, and once again, I'm using 24 gauge wire. The hole on this agate is very, very big. So you really have no limitations as to what size of wire you can use. On this, I would use something that is at least 24, but if you've got something bigger on hand, your only limitation really is always the size of your bead. So in this particular case, we are limitless as far as what type of wire we can use. So I'm going to take my 24 gauge wire, I'm going to thread that through the top of my crystal like so, and then I'm going to take my 2 ends of wire, and I've got a short end here, which is about 1.5 inches, and then I've got a long end, which is all the rest of my wire, and I just cut myself a random length piece. I think it's about 6 inches. Then I'm working off of, and I'm going to bend those wires against the hole of my stone to make a triangle. And I want the point of that triangle to be directly above, hey ASO, it's not Tuesday, happy Thursday. To make a triangle, we want the triangle to be directly above the point of the bead. Now we're going to grab our chain nose pliers, and that is one thing I forgot to say. You're going to need all of your basic wire working tools for this. So you're going to need your chain nose, you're going to need your wire cutters, and you're going to need your round nose pliers. So I'm going to take my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to grab the longer of these 2 wires right above the point where these 2 wires cross. And then I'm just going to bend it back like so. So what I've done is I've centered this wire above the central axis of the bead, which is also directly centered above the point. Okay, so there's a theme going on here, is if your things aren't centered, your piece isn't going to hang properly. It's going to hang kind of sideways and off kilter. So now I'm going to take this short wire, and I'm going to wrap it, I'm going to coil it around the long wire, and I usually do this using just my fingers, and the way that I get this to stay is I'm pinching the wire against the sides of the bead with whichever hand I'm not wrapping with, and I'm trying to decide. You see me switching hands because I'm trying to decide which is going to be better. For me, holding with my right and wrapping with my left, or holding with my left and wrapping with my right. And holding with my left and wrapping with my right appears to be the winner here. So I'm just wrapping as tightly as I can around that core wire. And so I've got 2 wraps, 2.5 wraps is fine. You're going to be doing more wraps coming down towards this, so you don't want to make this part here too big, or you're going to wind up with just a whole lot of wire wraps. Then I'm going to grab my cutters, and I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. And then you can see I have a bit of wire that's kind of, sticking out, and we don't want that, so we're going to grab a chain nose pliers, and we're just going to press that down so that we don't have anything that's going to stab or scratch or catch on clothing or anything like that. Because as I have said in previous streams, there's nothing more off-putting to a potential client than jewelry that tries to hurt them or their clothing. So now that I have made my initial wrap on this cherry blossom agate, now I'm going to do my second wrap. So when you're doing anything that's top drilled like this, it's a two-stage process to do the wrap, which once again, those of you who were on last night's tutorial stream got a belly full of that with all the top drilled wraps that I did on that stream. But it's a two-stage process. So stage one is creating essentially a beaded head pin, for lack of a better word. So I've got bead on a stick. So if I wanted to, I could actually just drop a bead on top of this, wrap it up, and use it as an earring. My second is going to be my attachment wrap, and this is the wrap that's actually going to attach it to my bracelet. So I'm going to grab my round nose pliers, and I'm going to place my round nose pliers so that they are touching the top of that wrap that I just made. Now my chain's a little bulky, so I want to make sure that I make a wrap that's big enough to go around my chain. So don't go all the way down here on the tip of your pliers. That's going to make you a very teeny wire wrap. It's not going to fit. So you want to go solidly in the middle or even a little bit closer to the bottom of your pliers. And you're going to take your offhand, your non-plier hand. So I'm a right-handed individual. That means my left hand is going to be doing most of the work in this scenario. And I'm going to push that wire over my pliers to make a 90-degree angle. So I just pushed that down to essentially my 90-degree point. Now I'm going to loosen my pliers, rotate them about 1/8 of a turn. Notice that was independently of the wire. And grab again. So I'm grabbing right on that little corner that I just made. I'm going to pull that wire back up over the top of my pliers and down. So notice what I'm doing here is I'm starting to make a circle around the jaw of my pliers. Now I'm going to loosen my pliers, rotate them out of the way, and grab again. The reason I had to rotate them out of the way is I need to finish my circle and cross at this point right here. Couldn't do that before because my pliers were in the way. So now I'm going to push that underneath my pliers and away from me, and that makes my completed center loop, which we call Our Lady with a Scarf. So ideally, if you did this right, your loop should be directly centered over your wire wrap, which should be directly centered over your bead. Now I'm going to grab my chain and I'm going to find that middle link. So again, there are my 5 links, so it's going to be this one here. A little trick for making sure that you attach everything on the correct side of your link, and now granted this is the first thing I'm attaching, so there is no right or wrong side, but that's not going to be true for the rest of this project. But the best way to make sure that you always attach on the same side is you're just going to find your link, and then you're just going to fold your chain over so that you have a nice large exposed piece of chain, and your other chain is literally blocking the other side of that link from you. That's going to make a little bit more sense in a second when we go to attach our second piece. So I'm going to take my wire and I'm going to thread that through my loop of chain, and I'm just going to attach that so that my chain is completely enclosed in my wire loop. Then I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and I'm going to hold across that wire loop like so, and then I'm going to wrap. And I'm going to wrap starting at the base of my loop, wrapping nice and tightly downwards. And so in order to get nice tight wraps, I'm pulling pretty hard on this wire in my hand. Okay, I'm legitimately pulling on it to get nice tight wraps. Once I meet the end of the wire that is already there, you're just going to trim that off, and once again you've got a little pointy stabby bit. You can see that poking up right there. We don't want that, so we're going to just press that down, and that is this one of adjusting. Alright, so that is my first attachment on my charming leather bracelet. Alright, my next 2 attachments are going to be 2 jump rings, so this is a lot easier. I started with the most difficult ones. The best way to open a jump ring is to grab yourself 2 chain nose pliers. The chain nose are, again, they're the flat ones. They're the ones that are used for grabbing, holding, and squashing things. So we're going to go ahead and grab our 2 chain nose pliers, and we're just going to twist our ring open. So all I did was I twisted my ring out of plane. Notice I didn't open it up. I didn't destroy the circle here. I just twisted it to give myself an opening where I can attach it to my charm bracelet without having to remake the circle, because that's really difficult. Now, here's where we start talking about what side of your link is the correct side. So when you're doing something like this, see how this charm is hanging, below these two perpendicular links on this one? We want the next charm to be hanging in the same place. If you attach your charms, one on the top, one on the bottom, your piece isn't ever going to lay right. It's always going to, kind of be twisting and being awkward. So this is where, again, this comes in handy. Okay, so I'm going to identify what's the correct side of my link. Just fold your chain like so, and you literally cannot put it on the wrong side of the link if you do that. So I'm going to grab my charm with the jump ring. I'm just going to slide the jump ring onto that link of chain. Once it's connected, I can drop my chain, and then I need to make sure that I close this jump ring up as tightly as possible. Okay, jump rings get a bad reputation for not being secure, and a lot of times that is not any fault of the jump ring. It is user error because people don't close their rings sufficiently. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and attach my charm to the other side. That's going to be my other charm that has a jump ring, this cute little ohm charm. So again, I'm going to take my 2 pairs of chain nose, and I'm going to open up that jump ring. I'm going to identify which link of chain I'm using and which side of that link is the correct side, which is that. And I'm just going to hook my jump ring onto the chain, and then again close it up nice and tightly. Now when you have charms that are directional like my 2 are, you do want to give it a quick reality check and just make sure you put everything on front ways. Okay, that happens to me a lot where I'll do something like this and I'll look and all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, well that ohm is completely backwards. Okay, so you want to make sure that you've put everything on the right way. Okay, now I've got my 2 beads, my citrine bead and my hamsa bead. So I'm going to start my attachment by putting each of those beads onto a head pin. Again, this is a head pin. It's a piece of wire that has a flat head at the bottom, hence the name. And then we're going to attach these with a basic wire wrap loop. So the basic wire wrap loop is just the second part of what we did to attach our little cherry blossom agate prism. So I've got my round nose pliers and I'm going to grab so that they are touching the top of my bead. Now, once again, with my non-plier holding hand, I'm going to push my wire away, rotate my pliers up, pull my wire back up over the top. Note, I'm starting to make a circle there. Rotate my pliers out of the way, push my wire underneath my pliers and away from me to make my lady with a scarf. Now, once again, I'm going to find the link of chain that I'm attaching. I'm going to flip that back. I'm going to take my lady with the scarf. I'm going to take that wire and I'm just going to thread that into my chain and then just pop my chain past that little joint and into the loop. And you want to try and do that as gently as possible so that you don't completely deform your loop in the process. Now that that loop is on my chain, I'm going to hold across that loop with my chain nose pliers and I'm going to wrap. So I'm going to start at the base of the loop and I'm going to wrap around, and then I'm just going to keep stacking my wraps, each subsequent one beneath the previous one until I've reached my bead. Now, if I get to a point where I have such a short piece of wire here that I can't really hold on to it, then I'm going to grab with my other pair of chain nose and just keep pulling that around. And you want to do that until you have reached your bead, which I have. I'm going to go ahead and trim. Press that end down, so once again, no pointy stabbies. And then we're going to do that again with our shell hamsa bead. So I'm going to go ahead and grab with our round nose pliers and we go away, rotate back up over the top, rotate underneath. This is once again the lady with the scarf, and this is going to go on the other side of my chain. So find that link, fold it back, thread that wire up that link and pop it into the loop like so, then hold across with your chain nose pliers and wrap. And once again, if that piece of wire is too short for you to get a good grip on, don't worry. You can grab another pair of chain nose and use it to help you pull it around. Once you've reached the bead, you are done. That's when it's time to trim and press down your pointy stabby. So this is the charm section of your charming leather bracelet. Now you could very easily continue this on a longer piece of chain and just have a whole charm necklace, which would be completely awesome. But we're going to go ahead and attach this instead to a couple of pieces of leather to make our bracelet. So I'm going to take my leather and I'm going to cut it into, what do I have? 3 feet of leather, so 2 18-inch pieces. Alright, and then I'm going to take one of my 18-inch pieces and I'm going to grab that end link of chain. This is the very end link. Okay, so remember when we were counting out our chain, we had those 5 links for our charms and then 1 extra link at each end. So I'm going to take my leather, thread it through my chain link, and I'm just going to fold it in half. Now I'm going to tie a barrel knot. So a barrel knot is actually a sliding knot, though the sliding part of it is less important in this particular project than the appearance of it. So just to give you a quick look, the barrel knot are, again, those 4 knots that you see on the side, 2 on each side of your bracelet. So I'm going to take my leather, which I have folded in half, and I'm going to pick one piece. I'm going to take the piece on top, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start coiling that piece around the other piece of leather and then also around itself. So what I'm doing is I started to the back and I coiled around this piece of leather and itself, and I'm going to do that 3 times, traveling from right to left. Okay, so I'm traveling back towards this chain, and I want to keep my coils a little bit loose because in just a minute I'm going to be feeding my leather back through them. Okay, so that's 3 times around. So I've got 3 coils. Then I'm going to take the end of my leather and I'm going to feed it back down through all 3 of those coils like so. And I'm going to grab my working end and I'm just going to pull it through. Now what you want to do when you're pulling it through is you want to make sure that you kind of just hang on to these 3 little loops that you've made, because if you just pull without kind of, policing these and corralling them, they're going to get all messy, and we don't want that. We want a nice, neat little barrel. You can pull that nice and tight, and then if you pull on the other string, it will snug right up to your bracelet. Okay, now I'm going to do the same on the other side. So once again, I've got my, oh dear, which one of you is my working piece and which one of you is my scrap piece? They're exactly the same size, so it really doesn't matter. I'm going to take that leather, I'm going to thread that through, again, the end link of my chain, fold that in half, and then once again I'm going to tie my barrel knot. So I'm going to take this top piece of leather and I'm just going to go to the back, so I'm starting away from myself to coil, and notice I'm kind of pinching that with my right hand to sort of keep it in place, and I'm going to do 3 coils, loosely traveling back towards this chain. So that's 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to take the end of my leather and I'm going to feed that back up all 3 of my coils. So now I'm traveling again away from the chain with my working end of leather. I'm going to grab that end of leather, I'm just going to pull that through, and once again I'm going to hang on to those coils while I'm pulling to just make sure that they stay nice and neat. I'm going to pull that nice and tight, and then if I grab the other leather and pull on it, it'll snug that leather right up to my bracelet chain. Now I'm going to do a second barrel knot. This second barrel knot is strictly decorative. It serves no purpose at all except to look pretty. Now at this point you're going to notice that you have a short piece and a long piece of leather. That's because we only used 1 piece of leather to tie that knot a minute ago. So we're going to do the second knot with whichever piece of leather is longer, and that way we're going to keep everything even. So my long piece of leather is this one here, and I'm going to position my knot about 1 inch or so away from my first knot. So once again I'm just going to take that piece of leather, I'm going to wrap it around the back, and then I'm going to start coiling over the other leather and over itself, traveling once again back towards this chain. So I'm going right to left for 3 coils. That's 1, 2, and it's a little awkward to kind of hold all of these so they don't just sprawling off in all different directions, but I promise you it's possible. I'm going to take my working end and I'm going to string it back through these coils. Now I'm going away from the chain, go through all 3 of them, grab the working end and just carefully pull while you are hanging onto these coils, just making sure that they stay neat and tidy and pretty. And you're just going to go ahead and pull that nice and tight. So there's your second barrel knot, and you'll notice after that your ends, they might not be completely even, but they will have evened out somewhat. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So find the piece of leather that's longer, and I always find it easier to start with that piece on the top. So this is my longer piece of leather. If it were the other leather, I would literally just rotate my work 180 degrees in that plane to get that on top. Once again, I want to be about 1 inch or so away from the existing knot. I'm going to take that piece of leather and I'm going to coil it away from myself around the other leather and itself 3 times. So that's 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to go through. Again, back through those coils. Now we're traveling away from the chain. Grab your working end, and as you're pulling, you can kind of pulling with the working end is going to move this knot this way. It's going to move it towards the open end of your bracelet. Pulling back on the knot is going to move it closer to this knot. So we are kind of play with both of those things to try and get these knots evenly spaced. So my knot needs to go actually a little farther away. So I'm going to grab my working end and I'm going to work on just pulling that a little bit farther away. And I can kind of give it a little push. And there we go. So yes, I pretty much did that completely by eye. There's not really a great trick to how you can properly space that when you're doing barrel knots. You just need to remember all the tools that you have. As far as moving your knot, you know, you can pull your knot this way, you can pull your working end this way, you can also push your knot this way gently. If you push it too hard, you're going to get all of those cords in and jumble, so you just want to be gentle with that. All right, and now it's time to put our clasp on. So I'm going to measure my bracelet. I want a grand total of about 7 inches for my bracelet. So the first thing you actually need to do when you are figuring out just how much bracelet do I need in order to account for the length of my clasp, so that I, can get the size bracelet I want and not, mysteriously, 1 inch larger, is you need to figure out how long exactly are all of your clasp bits, and balancing them on a ruler like I am now is definitely not the most efficient way to do this, but it'll help me kind of show you. So you need to measure your clasp. In my case, that's the lobster claw in the ring. That's about 1/2 inch. If you're using jump rings to attach, you need to measure those. That's about another 1/2 inch, so we're at 1 inch. And then when you're using cord ends, the way that your cord ends work is this part here clamps onto your leather. That doesn't add any length, but this part here does. So that's about 1/8 of an inch, so we got another 1/4 of an inch. So we got 1.25 inches basically in finding. So that means if I want a 7-inch bracelet, that means I need 5 3/4 inches in my leather and charm section in order to wind up with 7 inches total. So I'm just going to make that a little easier for myself, and I'm going to make it 6 inches, which means I'm going to have a slightly larger bracelet than I had intended, but it's too early in my morning for me to try and divide 5 3/4 by 2. Yes, I know it's possible. I know it's not that difficult. I'm still not doing it. So 6 inches. I'm just going to ballpark that and use 6 inches as my length. So what I did is I just put down on my ruler, I centered this center link up on my 0, and then I measured out to the 3, and that's going to give me, that is where I need to cut that side, so I'm going to do that. Now I do have a fair amount of waste here. I have a solid 12 inches of waste. I cut 6 inches off of each piece. I don't recommend trying to be stingy on the leather in this particular project, because when you're tying these barrel knots, the more leather you have with which to tie, trust me, the easier it's going to be. Like, leather's not that expensive. In this instance, I'm totally okay with the waist. And you could potentially take these, you know, little leather snippets and you could turn them into a cute earring, you know, with some pearls hanging at the bottom or a little pendant or something. So it's not like you've made useless pieces of leather there, but you really do need that extra little bit of leather to tie your knot with. If you try and short yourself, it's not going to be a fun experience. Just take my word on that one, and take the word of anybody who's done that to themselves. So now we're going to attach our clasp with our fold over cord ends. So fold over cord end is just this piece right here. It looks like a little U. These cord ends that are a little bit more curved, trust me, are way easier to use than the cord ends that are shaped like more of a sharp sort of U shape. And you can get these. I sell these. Fire Mountain Gems also sells these. They are by far the easiest fold over cord ends I've ever used in my career. I refuse flatly to use anything else these days because everything else is just so much more difficult than these. So we're going to go ahead and place our leathers, and notice there's 2 of them, into our cord end, and we want them just to be flush with the end of the actual clamp part of your cord end. And I'm just holding it in by pinching. I've got the cord end slightly pinched in between my index finger and my thumbnail, and I'm using my thumbnail to hold my leathers in as well. If you extend them past the end of your clamp, that's totally fine. You can cut them off. You just need to remember that that is going to affect the overall length of your bracelet, because you're turning that, anything that extends out here, you're turning from usable bracelet length into waist. I'm going to take my chain nose pliers and I'm going to compress one side of my cord end down, okay? Just squeeze it down right on top of my leather. At this point now, everything should be kind of holding itself, so I can switch my grip, and I'm going to compress down the other end of my cord end. So notice I did that 1 and 1, so they're laying on top of each other. And after you've done that, then you're going to take your pliers, your chain nose pliers, and you're going to squash the whole thing flat. And once you've done that, you should be able to pull pretty firmly on that cord end, and it shouldn't go anywhere. But it's important that you do that one side at a time. If you try and just mash the whole thing, it's not going to be pretty. So once again, take my cord end, lay my leathers in there, make sure you're just kind of holding everything in place, grab your chain nose pliers, and bend down one side of your cord end, and then flip that around and bend down the second side of your cord end, and then, only then, smash the whole thing. Once again, you should be able to tug pretty firmly on this cord end, and nothing bad should happen. Okay, so now we've got our cord ends clamped onto our leather. So the whole purpose of cord ends is literally to clamp onto leather or other cords and give you a place where you can attach a clasp. So this is not a clasp per se, but what it's given us is the facility to attach a clasp onto our leather without having to mess around with wire or knots or tying it or anything. So it's just a little bit of a cleaner finish sometimes than some of the other ways you can attach a clasp to leather, but there are a whole bunch of ways to attach a clasp to leather. So if you don't like the look of cord ends, do not despair. There are plenty of other things out there that you can use. Now I've got my 2 jump rings that I'm going to use to attach my clasp. So once again, for opening jump rings, I'm going to take my 2 chain nose pliers. I'm just going to twist that jump ring. I'm going to hook that onto my cord end, and then I'm going to hook that onto, oh, that's hilarious. So this is something that you should really pay attention to, and I did not pay attention to it, which is that I have a good sturdy jump ring here, because we all know in the Beading Dream Stream that I am an advocate for the sturdiest jump rings possible. I have a problem. The hole in that clasp, too small. Won't fit. Oops. So not a huge insurmountable problem, because I bet you $20 that I have some kind of a jump ring on my work surface that I can use. This is the benefit of having a not completely pristinely tidy work surface, is you tend to have bits and pieces of things lying around for eventualities such as this. There we go. So I'm just going to harvest a slightly smaller jump ring. I'm going going to try that again, hopefully with a little more success. So just goes to show that, you know, first of all, it's a good idea to check and make sure all your parts work together before you get on the internet with the project. Second of all, this is why most of us crafters have 17 different sizes of jump rings and 17 different sizes of solder rings, because you never know, you know, what size you're going to need for any particular project. All right, so now that I've buried my round nose pliers in beads, not that I need them anymore for this project. You go over there, beads. We're going to try this again, hopefully with a jump ring that works. So I've got my open jump ring, just like I did before, except you'll notice this one is slightly smaller and thinner. The hope is that we learn from our mistakes, Lori. I'm going to say that I'm not batting 1,000 on that, but I'm at least hopefully, you know, batting 500. Yay, it goes on. So then I drop my clasp on there, and then I'm going to go ahead and close that up. And once again, make sure that you close it completely. Okay, you should not be able to see any light through your jump ring closure, because that's the other thing, okay? People don't use sturdy enough jump rings, they come open. People don't close their jump rings all the way, and not surprisingly, they fall apart. Now, seriously? And now I have no idea what I did with the other jump ring, so that's okay. I'm just going to harvest another one from my little box of tricks here. Mercury is out of retrograde, but now we're in the super, super fun retrograde hangover where everything's still messed up, which I believe is supposed to continue through the 7th. Okay, so I've got another jump ring here that's open, and I'm just going to grab my bracelet. I'm going to thread that through my cord end and then through the other half of my clasp, and then I'm going to make sure to close that completely. So just once again, make sure you close that so you can't see any light through it. It's completely closed, and you can give it a good tug for good measure. As long as you've used sturdy jump rings, that is plenty secure. And that is our charming leather bracelet. I think it turned out really nice. I like the bronze leather. So you can use really whatever leather you want. You can use whatever chain you want, whatever charms you want. It's a really fun project. You can make it sparkly. You can make it boho. You can, you know, do all of your crystals. Like if you want to do a love or a retrograde one, you know, you can have different charm bracelets with all your crystals for all of your different, you know, kind of metaphysical needs. So it's a really fun and versatile project that you can really do a lot with. So I am Allison from Beating Dreams in Dallas, Texas. Thanks, Lori. Thanks for hanging out with us for our charming leather bracelet on our lunchtime stream this Thursday afternoon. Any of you who are local in Dallas, we are about to open. You can come see us Monday through Saturday from 1 p.m. until 6 p.m. If you're not local in Dallas, you can find us on this channel, twitch.tv/Beating Dream, 5 times a week with complimentary tutorials. We stream Wednesday through Saturday at 6 p.m. plus Thursdays at noon. That's the tutorial you just watched, and live merchandise sales every Wednesday and Saturday at 7:30 p.m. See you tonight, Lori. Tonight's project is a torch project. It is Torch Thursday, so we are doing this, which I have called the Halo Ring. This is a really fun project. This is also a project that gets to use a brilliant cut gemstone, okay? Most of the projects that we've taught on stream have been for like cabochons or rose cuts. So this is one of the projects, few projects that I'm going to be teaching where you can use an actual brilliant cut stone and make a really cool setting for it. So that's going to be tonight's project, which is going to commence at 6 p.m. Central Time here at twitch.tv/Beating Dreams. So I hope everyone has a fantastic Thursday afternoon. And if we're going to see you tonight, fantastic. I'll look forward to seeing you then. If we're not going to see you tonight, hopefully we'll see you on another stream really soon. Anybody out there who's new, of course, if you haven't already done so, one of the ways you can help us out that doesn't cost you a dime is to like us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or Twitch. And of course, just showing up to watch these streams helps us a lot as well. So everyone have a great Thursday afternoon, and we will see you all tonight.